So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, one of the big questions of this offseason as the NFL draft approaches is whether or not there will be a suitor for the number 2 overall draft pick. The Detroit Lions currently hold it after having a 3-13-1 record in the 2021 NFL season, but there's been speculation that the Lions may want to acquire and acclimate more draft picks before selecting somebody at number 2. And there's been a lot of speculation. Maybe the Jets want to move up. Maybe the Giants want to move up. Maybe, there's another dark horse team that wants to move up for a top player in this NFL class. That team that feels like they're that one player, that one edge rusher, that one Kayvon Thibodeaux, that one Kyle Hamilton away from a Super Bowl run. Maybe that team looks to move up as well. But in today's video, I have thought long and hard about this fact. I have thought long and hard about different scenarios and different teams that could trade up. And I wanted to go through a scenario. I wanted to come up with a scenario where it was beneficial for both teams, where both teams win this trade, both teams get what they want out of this trade. And it's not just biased towards the Detroit Lions, but it's balanced for both teams. Both teams get what they want. Both teams thrive and succeed with this trade. The Lions can get more draft picks and still get a top prospect, whereas the team trading can move up and get a difference maker where they wouldn't get it at their position in the draft. So with that being the case, I came up with a trade scenario that I think is the most realistic for the number 2 overall pick. And with that being said, I think the most realistic trade partner for the Detroit Lions is the New York Jets. Now, the New York Jets have a lot of draft capital to move around in this year's draft. They hold the number 4 pick, the number 10 pick, the number 35 pick, the number 69 pick. They hold a lot of picks within the top 100 this year and have a ton of capital, 2 picks in the top 10 to make their team significantly better. But they do sit at the 4th overall pick, which I believe is just outside the range for one of their top 2 prospects, being Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeaux. I don't believe the Jets are going to target a tackle in this class, being Ike Ekwonu or Evan Neal, as they have Mekhi Becton coming back from injury, who in his rookie season was one of the best tackles in the NFL. And I don't believe they go safety Kyle Hamilton because of the fact that they already have Marcus May on a big-time contract, and their secondary really wasn't that bad from a season ago. And I think the Jets, with Robert Saleh, will be looking to target a defensive lineman in this year's class. But at the number 4 overall position, if they fell in love with one of the top 2 guys, being Thibodeaux or Hutchinson, they will likely not get one of those players, as I believe the Lions, the Jags, or the Houston Texans, 2 of those 3 teams will take an edge rusher. I believe Evan Neal will go number 1. I believe the Lions will take an edge rusher at pick 2, and I believe the Texans will take the other pass rusher at pick 3, leaving the 49ers with either a safety at a position they really truly don't need, or George Karlaftis, that one tier below the top tier edge rushers in this class. Now, I think the Niners are going to take an edge rusher in this class or look for defensive line based off of Saleh's history. With the 49ers, Robert Saleh in the 1st round helped them draft DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Solomon Thomas, Nick Bosa, and Javon Kinlaw, all in the 1st round in nearly back-to-back drafts, with the only draft class not having a defensive lineman in the 1st round was the 2019 draft class, where they took a tackle instead of a defensive lineman. But regardless, in the last 7 draft classes with Robert Saleh, they selected a lineman, whether it be offensive or defense, and 5 of those 6 times they drafted defensive linemen, primarily edge rushers such as Nick Bosa, Solomon Thomas, and Eric Armstead. Now the Jets already have a solid foundation with their defensive line, having both Carl Lawson and Quinnen Williams on that defensive line, but I think Saleh's not going to be okay with that. Saleh is not going to settle for just Quinnen Williams and just Carl Lawson. He's going to want to add his Nick Bosa. He's going to want to add his Eric Armstead. He's going to want to add his DeForest Buckner. He's going to want to get that all-pro caliber edge rusher, and you're not going to get that, in my opinion, with George Karlaftis. You're going to get a good player with George Karlaftis, but not an all-pro caliber player. You're not going to get your Nick Bosa at 4. You're not going to get your Aiden Hutchinson or your Kayvon Thibodeau at 4, because by the time the 4th pick rolls around, both of those guys will have already been selected by a different NFL franchise, and you're going to be stuck in a very awkward situation. So with that being said, the Niners with Robert Saleh were never afraid to trade up. In the 2017 class, they traded up for Solomon Thomas. They've never been afraid to move around in the NFL draft, and they've never been afraid to take a defensive lineman, even when people think they shouldn't, and even when people think they were oversaturating that position with first-round picks, they continued to do it, and a large part of that was Robert Saleh's identity and how he wanted to build the defense, and I think that's still going to be his identity going into the Jets. He didn't really have an opportunity to draft a great defensive lineman a year ago, as there wasn't really that top-tier edge rusher a season ago. There was no Chase Young, there was no Nick Bosa, there was no Kayvon Thibodeau last year, right? And they needed their franchise quarterback, so they selected the BYU quarterback in Zach Wilson, and also selected, I believe, Elijah Vera Tucker with their 2nd-round pick. Once again, Robert Saleh addressing the trenches, which is important to know. And I think this year, with a really deep defensive line class, Robert Saleh will go back to his roots and want to draft a defensive lineman. And I don't think he's wanting to settle for tier 2. I think he wants the best lineman available. And that lineman, that best edge rusher, is going to be available to Detroit at number 2 and will not be available to the Jets at pick number 4. Now you might be thinking, okay, this makes sense for the Jets. Why would it make sense for the Lions? Well, Brad Holmes has said multiple times that he is not afraid to move around in the NFL draft class, and they are not specifically reliant on the edge rusher position, as safety and other positions are also big positions of need, and acquiring more draft picks would allow them to address all those draft needs, whereas the Jets really have one primary need, and that is the edge rusher position. So with that being the case, it makes sense for the Lions because they can pick up 2-3 more picks in this NFL draft, and the Jets get their number 1 guy. It makes sense for both teams. Now the only thing standing in the way is the actual picks. Now I went through a couple different scenarios. I went through a couple different mock drafts and a couple different trading scenarios with the strictest settings on to really try to hammer home the realistic possibility of trading for the number 2 overall pick, and this was the trade that came out of it. The Detroit Lions in this trade received the number 4 pick, the number 35 pick, the number 69 pick, and the 162nd pick in this year's NFL draft class, while the Jets move up to number 2, but also receive a middle of 6th round pick, being the 217th pick in the NFL draft. Now, the Lions get 4 picks, the Jets get 2. The Jets move up 2 selections in this class and select their guy, whether it be Kayvon Thibodeau or Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson reminds me more of a Robert Saleh type pass rusher, kind of reminds me more of a Nick Bosa than Kayvon Thibodeau does, so I think they'll go Aiden Hutchinson, but I also think at that point the Texans will go with Kayvon Thibodeau, whatever edge rusher is left, leaving the Lions at number 4 to take the best player available for them, in my opinion, Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame. It's a win-win for both teams, and the Lions get their guy, and they get more draft picks to address later in the draft, right? And you might say this trade is unrealistic, but there is a really good example that I tried to base it off of from a few years ago in the 2017 NFL draft class, where the Chicago Bears at the number 3 position were afraid the Niners were going to take a quarterback, so they traded up just 1 spot. In doing so, gave up the 3rd pick, the 67th pick, the 111th pick, and a 3rd round pick for next year, which eventually averaged out to be the 70th overall pick, which, unknowing to the Bears, would actually turn out to be Fred Warner. So the Bears, kind of lost that trade because Fred Warner's an all-pro linebacker and Mitch Trubisky's not on the team anymore. But regardless, that is the kind of trading scenario that I put together. That's kind of the trade I based it off of, was that Niners-Bears trade, and it's a very similar trade. And if anything, the Jets are actually getting more value out of this draft pick than the 49ers did in 2017. Now, with that being said, in this hypothetical scenario, Evan Neal would go first overall. The Jets would trade up, giving up pick 4, 35, 69, and 162 to move up to the second overall pick, and in return would, of course, receive pick number 2 and pick 217. The Jets would then pick Aiden Hutchinson. The Texans would pick Kayvon Thibodeau, and the Lions would then be kind of forced, but also not really forced, because you're getting the best player in the class to take Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame. The Jets get the best player on their board. The Lions get the best player in the draft. The Jets address their biggest position of need and follow the Robert Saleh history. The Lions get, in my opinion, the best player in the draft and arguably the most impactful player in the draft at a position of need, at the biggest position of need with the 4th overall pick. And then just for some fun, I went through the rest of the 1st and 2nd rounds just to, kind of see what those other picks might net us. And it came out like this. At the 32nd pick, the Lions drafted Malik Willis. At pick 34, they drafted Arnold Ebiketie, the edge rusher from Penn State, who I think is kind of in that tier 2, bottom of tier 2, top of tier 3 edge rusher class, right? I think he's middle tier 2. I think he's below Karlaftis. I think he's below Jermaine Johnson, but I think he's right there after that, being that 5th edge rusher in the class, being a borderline 1st round pick. And then at pick 35, you got your wide receiver 1 in George Pickens. Right, you can switch that out if you want with David Bell. You can switch that out with, Jahan Dotson if he falls that far. Whatever the case may be, you can address your wide receiver 1, your quarterback 1, your safety 1, and your edge rusher 1, or I guess edge rusher 2 with Romeo Okwara in those picks. The Lions address all their positions of need, all their major positions of need, and the Jets get their player. I think this is a scenario that works out really well for both sides. It's a scenario that works out phenomenally for both teams. And if there is going to be a team to draft up to get the number 2 overall pick, I think it's going to be a team that's already in the top 10 that feels like if they don't trade up, they're going to miss out on their guy. And that one team to me is the New York Jets. Now, there's going to be people saying, okay, well, what if the Jets were to trade, the 4 and the 10th pick? What if, there's a scenario where we get 2 top 10 picks? In my opinion, that doesn't make any sense for the Jets. In my opinion, that would be the Jets giving up too much for a player, regardless of their positional value, regardless of their potential, and regardless of the draft grade that they may have. Giving up 2 first-round picks to move up 2 spots doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And giving up 2 top 10 picks to move up just 2 spots in the NFL draft makes even less. The Jets are not going to give up the 10th and the 4th pick. That is just simply unrealistic. What isn't unrealistic is giving up the 4th pick, which is, again, you would use that to move up 2 spots. But to make up that difference, give a 3rd, a 4th, and a 5th round pick in return for that number 2 pick and a 6th round pick. It's even value, it's even trade for both of the teams, and both teams get what they want out of it. In my opinion, the most even trade that could possibly come of it. So with all that being said, that is life for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think about this trading scenario. If you'd like, I can come up with a couple more trading scenarios, a couple more scenarios where it makes sense for both teams, and the Lions could potentially get a lot more draft picks. But with all that being said, that is life for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Again, let me know what you think about this scenario down in the comments below. But with all that being said, that is life for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Until next time, and as always, go Lions!